Hi, I'm Janelle Benjamin, founder and CEO of All Things Equitable, a management consulting firm in the Greater Toronto Area, and the founder of this fantastic podcast focusing on workplace inequities for Black women. Twice as hard. Welcome back to the show, and I'd love to welcome my guest, Ashanti Martin. She is a writer, activist, podcaster. She does it all from Philadelphia. And Ashanti, welcome to the show.
Hi, Janelle. Thank you so much for having me. I have enjoyed this series so much. So I'm honored to be on it.
I'm really honored to have you. And right off the bat, I want to talk about, some of you've been writing for a living. You've been in the New York Times. You've been at the Journal. You were a journalist for The Record.
In northern New Jersey, just outside New York.
So let's talk about, I guess, this thing that you've had to do working twice as hard, let's say, in journalism. What does that look like for a Black writer, a Black female writer?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my experience working at a daily newspaper was really fun. I learned a lot, to be a young reporter, like 21, 22, just kind of being thrown into that world. A lot of kind of what people think of is in terms of like, what newspaper life is like, maybe if you've watched a movie about media or newspapers, like it really is like that, so I say that because it is an intense environment. There are a lot of personalities that clash, and especially when I first started working, right around the turn of the millennia, workplace behavior and like HR was still, whereas now like HR is called like people, or stuff like that. Like I was more in the time where it was just transitioning from like personnel to HR. So things like harassment and stuff like that. I mean, it was a thing, but it wasn't front and center in any dialogue about the workplace, as far as I know. But anyway, as far as having to work twice as hard in that environment, I would say that one of the things that I had to shoulder, and that other Black reporters in particular, but other reporters of color had to shoulder, was the expectation that we could write stories about Black people that white journalists could not. And then we would, be assigned stories based on that expectation, often by white editors. So it was a burden on me, because I'll just give you one example that always sticks out for me. I was asked by my editor, who to that point, and, thereafter, I had no reason to, think he was a bad guy. I always I liked him. I liked working for him. I learned a lot from him. But he was an older white male. And he asked me, well, I want to write a story about how, about parents who don't have a lot of books at home, and parents who don't read to their kids, and then the impact of that, and contrast it to like a family that does have lots of books. So they said, why don't you go out to Paterson, which is in a city of decent size in northern New Jersey that is predominantly Hispanic and African American. So go out to Paterson, some of the daycare centers, and find parents who don't have books at home. And I was just like, okay, why?
Weird assignments.
It's a strange assignment. And right around that time, and I still see it today, there's this belief that, studies have shown, and I can't say one way or the other if they're valid or not. They may have been proven invalid, but I don't know. But that, the number of words that you say to a child, has a lot of impact on their intellectual development. So essentially, he was trying to get me to be the one to report that Black parents and families don't read to their children. And I just, it just sat terribly with me,
Mhm.
and I didn't do it, I just kind of ignored it. I was like, I just kind of let it slide because I was
Right.
like, I don't want to be complicit in that.
Right.
Another example is like being out on the beat, going around these towns and talking to business people, city residents, leaders, in very white neighborhoods, suburban areas. And many of us, Black women reporters, having the cops called on us, being told to get out, when we're just trying to do our jobs, but we were just not welcome. And then you have a newsroom full of white editors, mostly male, who don't get that. They don't understand how it's different for us walking into a majority white council meeting and having all eyes on you. And then you're supposed to be there asking the tough questions.
Right.
So that's just one example of not necessarily, I think the twice as hard really could be interpreted a lot of ways. And
Mhm.
that's one way, because it's really something that, white men don't have to shoulder,
Yeah.
and they are oblivious and blind to it until it's pointed out and until they decide to believe it.
Yeah, you've raised an interesting uh, issue with both those examples. The first is that sort of microaggression that you feel, and
Hmm.
um that
Yeah.
innately this isn't right, right? But what do you do? Do you put your job at risk? Do you look insubordinate? Do you, whatever it is, to
Hmm.
not do the assignment? Do you speak up? Do you push back? It puts us in these weird positions when we get these strange requests on the job. In your case, it was, go do this thing that is damaging to your own community. But sometimes it's just go fetch me that coffee, and then it's like, what do I do? What do I say in the moment, right? That makes it so uncomfortable. And then in the second example, just that, being that only person in the space and entering and feeling othered and feeling unwelcome, right? That spirit of belonging that just sometimes isn't there for us, that other people just don't have to think about. Have you had that occur in other areas of your life, or would you say was mostly just, in journalism?
No. So, I was a journalist for about 6 or 7 years, and then I went on to a career in higher education. I worked
Mm,
at first Rutgers University, which was my alma mater for both my undergraduate and graduate degree. And then I
mhm.
worked at the University of Pennsylvania. So that's where, and I spent 8 years at each place. And and then also have worked in other offices, internships, worked at a
Yeah.
small weekly newspaper in New York City, where I was the only reporter who was, not just not white, but not rich.
Right.
This was unpaid internship, and all the kids there went to like the prestigious Upper East Side schools in Manhattan. And I
Mhm.
was just taking the train from Yonkers, and I couldn't even work there full time because I had to work another job. But and I was also a laboratory assistant, for a few summers. So I've had diverse and varied workplace experiences, and I would say all of them came with instances where you, you know, you run into, people just say stuff that lands terribly. I remember one time, um, I was working at a university, and there was an event on campus, and Praz from the Fugees was performing, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think he actually might have been, it wasn't even a performance. I think it was a speaking engagement. So the marketing for it was, we were putting an ad together and had a picture of him. And my supervisor at the time was like, it said how in his bio he had gone to Yale. I
Okay.
don't know, he had attended Yale in some, and we know that all three of the Fugees, Wyclef, Lauren, and Praz, all extremely accomplished, educated people, you know. So maybe not everybody knows that, but anyway, she's like, he don't look like no Yale, you know. And this was a white woman, so she
Oh
was
my
clearly
God.
trying to affect an AAVE, you know,
Yes.
speech. But I'm just like, wow, you know. And again, it's, you know, this was many years ago, and
Yeah.
I was a lot younger, and it was before a time where we really had the language, or like there was no Medium, you know, website, like the Medium, the actual
Right.
newsletter site. um you know, there was no Medium to write like, here are 7 ways to respond to a microaggression, you
Right.
know. Like,
Yeah.
it just, we didn't have it. So a lot of these things you let slide, and every time you let it slide, I'm sure you know, and many of your guests have been like, you know, well, what am I, what do I stand for, what do I believe in? I'm just letting, you know, these people say these things that are wholly inappropriate and hurtful to me. um and you know, and it's just those kinds of things that made me think, like, when I was applying to college, I got into Cornell, but I didn't go because I was just like, I just know I'm not going to fit in, you know, because I knew that things like that, people would say them. And I was just like, I just don't see myself, you know, thriving in that environment. I don't want to do that. But it's like, then it's kind of like limiting opportunities for yourself, you know, if
Yeah.
that's what you're making decisions based on how uncomfortable you're going to be. You know, that doesn't serve us necessarily that well either.
No, it absolutely doesn't. And you've raised some interesting points that a lot of my other guests didn't through the series, which, and one of them I want to address quickly before we get to the New York Times article that you wrote about Black Life LinkedIn and how it's in fact thriving. I want to talk first about just wealth gap. You know, you talked about just your experience of, you know, recognizing the neighborhood you came from, the schools and the opportunities, and how there was a difference in how you might be perceived or treated based on, you know, economic disparities that have impacted your life, and largely, you know, the Black community generally. So let's talk about that just for a quick moment, and how, you know, the experience for Black women can be twice as hard when we don't have the financial support or the economic resources that other communities have.
Yeah, honestly, it's like, where do I begin? You know, like, seriously, where do I begin? Apologies if you hear some noise in the background. It's this very sunny spring day and people are feeling it, I guess. So somebody's blasting some music.
I can't hear it at all.
Good. So, um, you know, the wealth gap. I guess I'll start with my own family, because in the last 7 years, I learned a lot about my family history that I had not known about. And one of them, you know, it's a long, lot of details, but it'll boil down to my great great grand relatives were born, you know, enslaved on a plantation in South Carolina. And at some point, the white people who ran the plantation gave my male great great ancestors land, and also taught them how to read, write, do business, and also kept the family together, right? So this has helped me explain a lot about why, you know, in the place where I grew up, you know, I was considered privileged. It was always assumed that I would go to college. You know, we were definitely not rich, but because my parents, you know, both had educations, you know, we were pretty, like, you know, middle class, you know, wavering from like lower middle class. And then, you know, but other people, you know, other friends of mine and my contemporaries and peers struggled like a lot. And it just helped me realize that, you know, that wealth that my family inherited has a lot to do with, how I was set up for quote unquote success.
Right.
So that didn't sit well with me because, I don't like unfairness, and to know that these things that happened so many years before us have an impact on us now is really troubling. And I feel like there's something that needs to be done about it. So last year in 2021, I did co-found an organization that focused on land reparations and, essentially trying to, not even reparations, reclamation.
Yes.
In so many instances, Black Americans have had land outright taken from them. And then think about the impact of that, right? So like if my family had that land taken from us, how would that have impacted me? And then conversely, George Floyd's great grandfather, who also was born enslaved in North Carolina and had acquired 500 acres of land, he had it stolen from him by white farmers. So just knowing that, one of George Floyd's childhood dreams was to be a Supreme Court justice, but knowing that his family had lost, had all this access to land and wealth stolen, it just didn't sit well with me. So, as far as my work, I try to do everything with the lens of getting us richer. I never grew up actually. Like I mentioned, I was the child of two social workers. We were very much like just middle class, paycheck to paycheck. Had been on food stamps a few times. And I had never gone into, I majored in journalism, which is obviously not the thing you major in to make the big bucks. But so I had never really been focused on money. But once I made that connection, and then saw all the other inequities around me from, by seeing other white folks and seeing everything that they have, they have so much. They just, they have resources that no one I grew up with ever had. They have really nice homes. They're sitting on hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. Like, I have people who live in my neighborhood, white people who are like, oh yeah, I'm going to inherit $2 million when my parents die.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, why? Parents aren't even all that. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
They have houses, vacation homes that they can go to. Like they just have a lot, and we have very little. And that is not because we don't work hard or because, we are not talented. I think that in many cases, we have, there's this theory, which is my theory, and others, is that like a lot of the hate and oppression that has been visited upon us as a people is because of jealousy. So, and that was, that did kind of play out. It was like that in Tulsa, right? It was like anytime that we acquired a little bit and started doing business better than they did, we had to be, totally disenfranchised and brutalized. So, one of the ways that I'm trying to, as I I mentioned that I had co-founded this organization. I'm no longer with it. And so I'm really trying to focus now on content creation, as my full-time passion, and really building my personal brand that I've been working on for the past couple of years. So as I'm doing that, I'm really trying to only work with Black creators and Black business people, and just Black connections, because I want to drum up business for us. And to the extent that I might make any profit, I want to be able to share in that with, partners who I want to have more money, so that's really, so through my work, my activism, the things I write about, the things I talk about, Black folks in the workplace and the challenges that we have, and really how the workplace is very much like a modern day plantation and all that kind of stuff, through to just how I'll operate my business. I'm always focused on how can we get more money and start to close that gap. So
Yeah, and your New York Times article, Black LinkedIn is thriving, right after George Floyd was killed, was a huge success, testament to your fantastic writing ability, and definitely worth, everybody paying attention to you as a writer for sure. Talk about that article for a minute. What made you write it? And how are you going to perhaps even leverage it going forward? Calling LinkedIn to the carpet for the things that they, were accused of in that piece.
mhm. Well, yeah, I'll talk about how it came to be. And one of the things that people I think are aware of is that when I set out to write the story, I actually wasn't even that much aware of some of the issues that Black creators were having, um, with their content being restricted or censored, or with them being kicked off the platform. I wasn't really aware of that. I was more interested in writing about just the voices of these women who were saying something, both in substance and in the manner that they were saying it, to an audience that like never really wanted to hear it. So white professional, that world, that milieu, um, you know, that you have people like Elizabeth Liva and Madison Butler with their spicy hot takes, and basically, saying that the days of how you operate your workplaces are over, or if they're not over, we're going to challenge them, we're going to speak out about them, because much like everything that was happening across the world after George Floyd was murdered, people had it, and people were outspoken. And so, I think that the parallels to the workplace are really okay. So I'll give you an example. I think a lot of us can relate to this, when we're working at our jobs, and the day after Trump was elected, we were all watching Hillary's concession speech in the lobby. Some of the white women were like crying, hugging each other. I'm not gonna lie, I might have been crying a little bit too. You know, obviously looking back, it's like, of course I cried.
Everybody was crying.
It was a mess.
Globally.
Right. So, but and it was like a whole display. But like there were so many days that I would come in after a weekend of just watching Black death, from Freddie Gray to Tamir Rice to Sandra Bland to Philando Castile and so many others. We would just take in those stories while we're sitting at our desks, while we're at home. We can't focus, we can't concentrate. But then when we get up and there's an all hands meeting, nobody says anything,
Right.
and then to have those same people then make a statement about the terrorist attacks in France, it's just really like, I know y'all are watching the news. I know that y'all are seeing this.
Yeah.
But here I am, like in the middle of a stand-up meeting, literally holding back tears because I couldn't stop thinking about that Facebook live stream where that cop shot Philando Castile. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I know. Right. And that's how I was feeling. But it's like, obviously no one else here cares. They care enough to mention other big things that are happening in the news. But like, Sandra Bland dying in police custody, that was extremely traumatic for me because I saw myself in her. It just never registered. So like little things like that built up for me over the years. And then having a really traumatic work experience with there was essentially workplace bullying, being micromanaged, trying to be pushed out. That was extremely, extremely difficult. And when I finally extricated myself from that situation, it was just me and my pen, and me on LinkedIn. I was sitting there, I was like, what am I gonna do with my life now? It's a pandemic, I don't have a job, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. I had a severance, so I was kind of like, had a little bit of time to chill, and I was very determined to like not work for a little while, because I was like, I've been working for 20 years, and the longest time that I had ever taken off was 2 weeks. So I was just like, I'm just gonna chill. So I was just, casually perusing LinkedIn for jobs and stuff, and I just noticed that I was spending more and more time there than I had ever really thought that I would spend on LinkedIn. I started leaving Facebook and spending more time on LinkedIn for a variety of reasons, but first and foremost was for women like Liz, Madison, you, and many, many others, just doing the damn thing and saying what needs to be said on a platform that never really wanted to hear it. So that's what I wanted to write. And then through the course of that writing, I learned that, in fact, they really didn't want to hear it, because so many people had experienced their content being flagged, their
Yes.
content being hidden without, any explanation or warning. And I was like, I really wasn't trying to get into all this. But you can't not write about that stuff.
Yeah.
Fun fact, I never liked investigative reporting when I was a reporter and a journalist. Like they would set me on things, and I would be like, oh, so investigate, what politician is behind this new building project, and are they corrupt? And I'd be like, I don't care. I don't care. So that's why I didn't last that long. But I always really loved writing human interest stories and profiles and explanatory journalism. So that's what I did when I finally had that downtime, and I just pitched that story, and being published in the New York Times was like a huge dream of mine, and I had never really been able to realize it. And I honestly thought that it was just never going to happen.
Yeah.
If it didn't happen in my 20s when I was hungry and whatever, and other people were doing it, I was like, oh, it's never going to happen. And I had just grown resigned to that. But just something, I think, for everyone, just a light switch flipped in the summer of 2020. And I think collectively we all just started doing things that we said that we could never do.
So
But
true.
then we were just like, you know what? F
Let's
it.
do it. Yeah, we
Yeah.
could do it. We could definitely
Right.
do it. So what's next for you? What are you going to be doing next, Ashanti? Are you going to be writing for the New York Times on a regular basis?
No. I mean, maybe,
Yeah.
I'm going to be writing for myself.
Mhm.
One of the things that I not a fan of is the gatekeeping. So while I know that, I can pitch story ideas to different publications, but I mean, I just have a lot to say that I don't want to have to be approved or vetted by, a team of editors who don't get
Right.
me,
Right.
especially because a lot of these publications and magazines that I would want to write for are extremely still very white. And, I was lucky enough to, I mean, the story was a good story. And I found an editor at the Times who was very receptive. But, so as far as what's on deck for me, I am really looking to start a newsletter or some other way where people who enjoy following me on LinkedIn
Mhm.
can access some more of my, more complex thinking, and perhaps witness or even be a part of, kind of thinking about the next piece that I write. So I'm just trying to, after a year of focusing on activism
Yeah.
and building a business, I want to try to get back to my roots now by writing as much as possible. So my what's next for me is really nailing down this habit of writing every single day. And
Yes.
it's not going great, but it's going better. I make a date of each entry, and it's like, now they're getting closer and closer. So that's where it all starts, is really just, spending the time writing and then putting that content out there in various formats. So everything is very wide open. I am working on a website. It's not ready yet. So in the meantime, people can definitely follow me on LinkedIn, where I'm just a couple hundred people shy of 10,000 followers. And I'm so excited.
Well,
So
after they see this episode of the show, they're definitely going to head on over to Ashanti Martin on LinkedIn, and they're going to click like and subscribe to your page over there, and you're going to hit that 10,000 mark. I know it. You've been a fantastic guest, and I wish you all the best, all the success with your newest endeavors, and I know that you're going to be fabulous. I'll be following definitely whatever it is that you're putting out there, and I know it'll be fantastic. So all the best, and thank you again for watching another episode of Twice as Hard. Ashanti will be working twice as hard, and so will I. And please don't forget to click subscribe down below in the subscribe in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, click like, comment, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, Ashanti.
thanks, Janelle.
Bye.